Here we go. There we go.
Great. Yeah, just like wanting to keep this super informal conversation wise. I've got a few questions for you, but
Sounds
let's
good.
kind of see where it takes us.
Love that.
Great.
Love that.
Well, Brit Holmes of Did You Know? We are so excited that you're here. And I just wanted to kick things off and with a very simple question of just how you're feeling in the moment we find ourselves in.
Ooh, good question. Way to start it off. I am feeling optimistic, I think. Yeah, cautiously optimistic.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's that's good from a worldview or from a communications perspective.
Mm. Worldview, definitely cautiously optimistic. Communications perspective, I would say that answer would be curious. Like, I think we're seeing a lot of changes right now happening with things. And so I feel like every day I'm kind of, being a communicator, you could know, theoretically everything. And then you wake up and a tech company announces something's changing.
Right.
So right now we have that, Gmail announcement that just came out this week. So that definitely has me kind of like, curious. Like, how is that going to get implemented? What does that look like for client? So curious. And then personally, I would say cautiously optimistic.
That's great. I love that. I think I'm cautiously optimistic where I'm seeing kind of the chaos within communications as a potential benefit, especially for like nonprofits and advocacy messaging, because our messaging
Yeah.
inherently is not dominated by algorithms and social media. It's a lot more empathetic and real. So, yeah, I mean, today you and I are here to really talk about email and automation. And I know
Yeah.
you are well versed in like everything communications, like you and I geek out about so much. But I'm just curious, like your perspective of email in this larger ecosystem that we find ourselves in right now, especially knowing that like it just feels like social media is always that golden child for nonprofits. So
Yeah.
what are you hearing? What's your perspective, and how are you talking to clients about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting time because I think you're absolutely right. Social media is kind of what everyone thinks of when they think of digital communications. Like, what are we doing on Facebook? What are we doing on Instagram? Like, what are we doing on Twitter? Not as much anymore, but people are always thinking about that. And I think that comes from they feel like that's where the supporters are. That's where board members can camp out and have many opinions about what you're doing. But oftentimes, like, they forget about email or they view it as an entirely separate beast, which, as we know from like a holistic communications perspective, is such a mistake. Besides Google's announcement, with the limiting of, needing to be certified and everything to send so many emails to a certain size list, which I do think in the long run will be good. A lot of people are forgetting about email, which is sad because that's something you have a lot more control over. You still don't have the most control. You can't always, pick exactly like how are people engaging with their email every day, all those kind of things. No, but you're getting directly in front of or getting a shot to get directly in front of people that have subscribed to you. And the fact that that's forgotten about so often, it's like, no, come on, like this is your champion. You can do more with this, and it should all be connected. It's all very holistic. A good communications plan should be. And yet, when we talk about digital comms, people often forget about email or an entirely separate team. A lot of times, like development or something just owns email, which is also a massive mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, I think that speaks to an even more granular perspective of like processes and organizational structure and making sure that you're set up to do holistic communications. Because I think what you mentioned around email being a champion is so important. I think of it as like a foundational structure. You know, you can do, once you get that email, you have so many different ways of communicating with people. And one of the things I think about with email is actually that it can be one of the most creative channels for people that a lot of people just aren't tapping into. Like you can have embedded GIFs, images, experiment with different text blocks and things like that to really tell your story and your message. And I really am not seeing that out there that much.
Yeah, and I think also people I think people underestimate the simplicity, like they think of email as really simplistic. You know, I back in the day, back in the day, I had a you know, boss that was just like, well, I send tons of emails all the time. How hard is it to get one out? And I'm like, what's the strategy? What's the goal? Like, and even starting off, I was like, oh my God, like this is what people think of email. They think it's this really, you know, don't you just send it?
Yeah.
Like, can't you just get something out? And they don't think about the strategy that can be in place behind it. And really the tagging and the like the way you can get so granular, like you had said about the information you're collecting, whether someone's clicked or not, or whether they're familiar with your series. This is the first time they're reading it. And all of that, I think the thing that scares people is it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know. So when they don't know these things and they start hearing about it, the first thing they think of is like, let's face it, most nonprofit communicators, they're at capacity, and not even, that's gracious, they're over capacity. They're on the way to burnout, you know, they're frying fast. And then you say, oh, there's going to be like 20 different versions of this email that can go out to make it more personalized or whatnot. And they freak out, but they don't realize like it's literally like 3 sentences added here, changing this order here. And so I think a lot of people, I don't use ignorant in like a pejorative way, but they're just ignorant of the possibilities. They don't know. And I think if they did know, they'd see how much better it moves them toward their goal and what they can do, and how it's actually pretty easy to set up and automate.
Yeah, that's such a good point, because I definitely wanted to get into automation with you, but also talking about kind of the reward of some of these tactics. You know, we have to prioritize our work. We cannot do everything that we possibly want to do as nonprofit communicators. And so what are the little pieces that are going to make the world of difference? Like the thing that you just mentioned about changing a few sentences, updating imagery to reflect your audience, you know, maybe that increases your fundraising goal by 10%. And what does that provide you in the future to go back into your communications plan, for example?
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, go ahead if you had something else to say.
No, go ahead. All right, continue. Okay. Sorry. I was like, and then I was like, nope. You get me excited because I'm like, yes. And then I'm like, nope, wait.
There are so many ways we could go down this path, but I guess like going back to the organizational and automation piece to it, like what are a few ideas and things that people could take back today that would actually be a huge boost for their communications that takes a shorter amount of time than they really think?
That's a good question. It's hard to answer because it really depends on the client or the person, the organization, the goals. I think the biggest thing that people can do, whether it be email or any kind of thing with their comms plan, is getting steadfast about what exactly they want to complete with that channel. And thinking about, you know, I love talking about user experiences. I never shut up about it. Call that my toxic trait. But, you know, thinking about their user experience with email. Like, I go back to the fundraising. So many nonprofit. I've worked with over 30. God, it might be even more than that now. Nonprofits at this point, and so often it's only owned by development. And I think the goal might be fundraising, but so many people don't have a clear goal on what that means. Is it just dollars? Is it engaging their audience? Like, what do they actually want? Like, what does that engagement look like? What drives people
Right.
to that end goal? Sometimes the goal isn't just the end goal, it's all the steps in between. So I really would say one thing people could do, and it doesn't take a lot of time, and it'll help crystallize their vision and their execution of something so much better, is like, what is the end goal and how can you get there with that medium in a way that is meaningful and provides value add to the user?
Yeah.
If you continue, I go back to the fundraising one because it's just a mistake I see way too often. If your emails only ever ask me for money, and I've already given you money, and then you say, I just need another $32. The average person gives 70, whatever it is, and I've already given that, I'm going to start tuning you out because I've already done the thing you asked. So where's the value add there? And I really wish more communicators could think about that literally today.
Mm-hmm.
What is your end goal and how could you build on that to create an ecosystem of invested people? And always thinking about, I always tell people, think about who are your brand evangelists?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what are you doing to piss them off?
It's a serious, really good question that not a lot of organizations are asking. And I know, like, yeah, I don't know if this is a good transition into the Google conversation because, like, Google's announcement of limiting or asking for verification before you're able to send mass emails to Gmail users is going to have a huge impact on fundraising, and especially as we go into the 2024 election.
Yeah.
And I think what you just touched on around essentially the humanization of your audience, that's where something that is spammy becomes something of value for the person that's going to get that email in their inbox. Yeah. And I'm just curious, like, what your thoughts are on the new Google ruling.
I have mixed feelings, right? So in totality, I think it's good. I think good things will come from this.
Mm-hmm.
I think I trust Google to make transitions seamless. We saw that with Google Analytics. The migration was not too bad I remember when it first got announced, GA4 is coming, everyone's freaking out. What does this mean? And I used to joke when I was an undergrad in college that Google was my husband because I just had so much faith in Google. I mean, I was the original tester for the Chromebook CR48. Like, my love of Google goes, and a healthy dose of skepticism as well.
Mm-hmm.
But my love of Google and trust in the company is pretty high, because when we have these big changes, they do shepherd us through pretty well. They want you to continue to use their products, so they're not going to make it more complicated. I do think that it will be difficult for smaller organizations that maybe have only one person working in comms or marketing and they're already overwhelmed and now they have to do this verification thing, and what does that look like?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hopeful that the verification won't be difficult. I'm also hopeful that it will make the next step of content like a higher bar to entry.
Yes.
And not like in an accessibility way, like, it's harder to get things to folks, but like good, inspiring, like you had storytelling content that really resonates with people. I'm hoping part of this is that we'll see a reward come from this change.
Yeah.
And up the bar in a way that's not hours worked or hours time needed to make these changes, but instead like the idea, like being more thoughtful of the end user and what we're communicating to them about our organizations. I think we'll see a big change there, and I mean I hope so, because I don't know about you, but I think we desperately need that shakeup.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I'm thinking of one example that really stuck out to me this week, because we're talking the week of October 3rd, which of course is Mean Girls Day. But it also
National
is the day,
holiday.
national holiday, where our dear friend Kevin McCarthy got kicked out of his job. We've also had like the passing of Dianne Feinstein, potential government shutdown that got averted, that's now less than 45 days away again. So there's a lot of chaos going around, right? Political
Right.
wise. And there are a lot of senators that I respect in the US Senate, but I do not respect their emails. And
I
Brian
feel that.
Schatz is emailing me like with subject lines that are like, "You deserve to know the truth." And I get that email and I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm going to get some information from within the Senate on how they're going to move the government forward. It was an email about their end of month, end of quarter fundraising deadline. And I got another email the next
That's the
day from
truth.
him. So, I give that example because there actually is so much content out there and information that organizations, elected officials, candidates can be giving people in our
Yeah.
emails. We're just not doing that right now.
And it's funny too, because like I think of with the student loaner payment, that those started up this month, and
Mm-hmm.
there's all of that around there. And one thing I thought that was really cool is AOC, big fan, who isn't? Well, lots of people, but listening to this, probably who isn't.
Right.
Um, I went on Instagram and talked about like there's probably 10 ways you could get some of your loans forgiven right now.
Mm.
And it was like a 3-part, or at least I saw part 3. Who knows how many parts came after that? But like that's the kind of information you
Yeah.
should also be send. And I don't know if maybe I missed it. I've been on an unsubscribe frenzy heading into this election just because I'm trying to re-opt in to the people I like instead of staying opted into everyone that sold my name to a list. But like, is that like that's a value add? Like
Mm-hmm.
that yes, Instagram for sure, not shitting on Instagram at all, obviously. But why is that not an email? And then like, if did you feel this information helped you and you can donate,
Right.
please give $5.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did find that super helpful. I will give $5. I almost wish when we come to political fundraising, I wish politicians would think of it like Patreon.
Oh, wow. That's a great example. I love that.
Like, I mean, like, when I subscribe to someone on Patreon, like they're giving me additional value. And when they
Yeah.
put something else out, I might even do the buy me coffee, whatever. Like, but I want to support that because they're continuing to make some type of information about some kind of
Mm-hmm.
content that I want to see and learn from.
Yeah.
Um, and why shouldn't we do fundraising the same way?
Yeah.
I think we
Well,
should.
and I think like what's interesting too is that like we always look towards new technology for things, and a lot of this is old technology, or it's not
Yeah,
even technology at all. Like,
right.
FDR's fireside chats are something that people wanted to listen to every single night. Like, yes, they had
Yeah.
essentially a monopoly over the airs, but like that doesn't mean that there's not like thousands of people that get on with AOC to watch her play video games. There's an audience
Right.
there that people just aren't tapping into.
And people want to, I think we're really disillusioned with society and stuff at this point. So I think a lot of people just are like, no one cares, no one cares. But if you
Mm-hmm.
actually look at the behaviors of like people and the actions of people in this country, no matter what side you're on, I don't see how you can draw that conclusion.
Right.
We're more divided now than we've been in a very long time. And I don't think that's because of apathy. um,
True, true.
like you're not apathetically opposed to something vehemently. Like that's not how that works. um, so I think part of it too is, we just say like people don't care, and I think to some extent we put that on the user. Um, instead of looking at, and yeah, media consumption, affects. I just gave a talk, what was that, last week, 2 weeks ago, where I said, like, no one cares as much about your content as you do. And
Right.
someone was like, ouch, I don't know, but also true, right? But the
Mm-hmm.
other part of that, though, the flip side of that is, what are you doing to make them care?
Right.
What are you, and I mean, I'm actually giving a talk on that at the end of this month. What's your why?
Mm,
Why should people care? And if they're not caring, what can you do? What sticks with them? And I think what sucks is that or what's disheartening is politicians know how to do this. We see it on the campaign trail all the time.
yeah,
You
absolutely.
know, I met a parent who has this child who couldn't afford medicine, and you don't remember the stats that they gave, but you're like, oh, that child with the medicine. We
Mm-hmm.
already know this works. We know it. We're doing it. But when it comes to emails and fundraising and social, we somehow forget all these things that have worked for decades.
Yeah,
Um, and we just ignore the human psyche and what we crave, which is connection.
absolutely. That's everything that we talk about at Roots of Change, connection and
Yeah.
storytelling. And I guess like a follow-up question to that is like getting to more of the concrete of that. You can have a fireside chat, you can have like these big campaign speeches, but obviously in our world, people are not everyone is willing to watch an hour-long speech. So what are those like tactical content examples that people can use to have this kind of storytelling and to show the why, and for it also to be fundraising building?
Yeah, I think, it goes back to um, people being like, well, I'm not a PR person or whatever. I'm like, I think we all have like a PR. If you're a communicator, you have some kind of PR lens
Mm-hmm.
that you should be thinking about. If you're not, you should. Um, but like talking points, like there's no reason why, when someone gives an address or comes on about important topic, whether it be politics, fundraising, a call to action, protesting, a presentation about an academic paper.
Mm-hmm.
I always say, if you cannot break down what you are talking about to a kindergarten level, why should I take you as an expert? Because if you are the expert of this field, which, let's face it, if you're an organization, you should be the expert, right? That's why people should be coming to you. You're the expert on this topic. Politician, you're the expert of your constituents and the things that you're working on, the committees that you're on. If you're an expert and you cannot explain why something is important to you, why the hell should people listen?
Yeah.
Why should I give my time? And so I think that's one thing, like, we need to do better too, is like, let's say you have this live, it's fantastic, but maybe viewership was low, or maybe it was great, but like, why is there not an email going out afterwards or the next day
Mm-hmm.
being like, we just had a fantastic, here's like the top 3 things we learned, boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom. um and yeah, I mean, different content, different, like what they say, different strokes for different folks, right? Like different content for different users. Some people do want that really deep long form content, and other people really just, they do want those stats and
Yeah.
knowing, and this is where like testing comes into play. Like, what does your audience like best, right? Is it do they like the stats on Instagram? Like, they like those little slides with a little quick explainer? Do you have a reel with some longer form content where you meet people impacted by this cause or this problem that you're trying to address? Are we talking about solutions and not only problems? Oh my God, that's another big one. Um, and like, so where are we doing all of this? How can you wrap that all in? And it shouldn't just be one thing for everything. You should be coming at it holistically and really, hitting every single part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Um,
Because Fleet Week started.
it has. we've got some fighter jets flying over. um, but yeah, I love those ideas. And I think like that's a piece too about like the media type that we use too. Like we're talking about a speech as an example, but there's a lot of other things, like if you're a volunteer program and you're working in real time, like at a location, capturing video, taking pictures, taking notes while you're there, having all of that together really saves a lot of your time, so that when you then come back to talking about what you've done, you have all this different type of content that you can use across all of your channels. And then you're building just one story, one speech into something so much bigger.
Yeah. And there's so much that we like. I'm always amazed. I was just meeting with a client earlier this week, and they had said like, well, we just don't have a lot of content. And it's like, well, what do you have? And they tell me, and albeit it wasn't a lot, right? Like it wasn't tons to go off of. But immediately I'm like, okay, well, can you repeat? Can you talk about why this event was important? What did that mean to the context of your organization? What did that mean to the people impacted by it? Not everybody that reads this is going to know who you are. What's the summary of your organization? And it's like all of that was right there. Yeah, they didn't get a lot, but like, what can you extrapolate from it? And even people that follow your organization, maybe not fully religiously, but decent fans, they're decent fans of you. Maybe they didn't know about this program that you're talking about.
Right.
So I always feel like a lot of times too, as communicators and marketers and folks in the movement, we sometimes are like, oh, well, we've said that already. And I go back, Bernie Sanders, however you feel about him, the one thing he did excellently, for better or worse, is continue to repeat the same punchline over and over and over again. And it stuck. It resonated for people.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, there's Elizabeth Warren did something similar. I feel like she sometimes provided more nuance or kind of follow up with it, which I think is helpful. But it's like that idea of like repeating those themes over and over and over again. And that's really important. And I think a lot of times we feel like we've already said that. But if it's worthwhile and it's your mission, it bears repeating.
Yeah. Yeah. I always tell my clients that it takes 5 to 7 times for your message to actually resonate with people. And, when you think about that, like 7 times, that is 7 different social posts, like 7 different emails.
Yeah.
You have to think about that full ecosystem, and then also think about like all of the other messages that people are getting constantly throughout the day.
And yours has to stick.
Yeah.
And I love that you say that, because I used to teach, and I would repeat things over and I wouldn't stay up there and be like, the crayon is blue, 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 the crayon is blue. Obviously not. But it might look something like, and it's so funny because again, like all this stuff that we're talking about, humans know how to do. We know how to do it. If you're explaining to a little kid what it means to pick up their room and put their toys away, you don't just go to a 3-year-old and say like, pick up your toys.
Right.
You walk them through it. The end goal, going back to user journeys, the end goal is to clean up the room. The end goal is to donate. How are you going to do that? First, you got to pick up the truck. Okay, picked up the truck, put it in the toy basket, open the email, read about the work we're doing. You got to pick up the doll. You pick up the doll, you put it in the toy basket, read about this other campaign that we're working on in the partnerships we did. And you slowly have to direct this very young child through each of these steps to get the room clean. You slowly have to direct your users through these steps to get to the end goal of donate or whatever it may be. And we know how to do this.
Yeah. I love that example. That makes it so easy to understand.
Yeah, it's right there. We know how to do it. We just, for some reason, I think when it comes down to it, I think it's like a lack of confidence as communicators.
Right.
And I think that comes from like burnout. And I think it comes
Hmm.
from, being overworked, having bad management, whatever it may be, or even just like being exhausted by the state of the world. But
Yeah.
like we know how to do these things, but at some point we believe either as an org or as individuals that the words that we're saying don't matter.
Yeah. And
And sometimes no one's even telling us that. We just think it.
yeah, I'm really glad you said that because I think that's really important. What is sticking out to me is that, we are nonprofit communicators in a world, in a society around us that influences our audience, influences us, and influences our organization. And especially when it comes to like social media and other ways that we're communicating today, those channels are really pushing people to communicate in a very specific way. Like they like the capitalist feel, buy, extremism. Let's let's have these like fearful conversations because that means that people are going to stay on these social sites for longer and Meta is going to get
Yeah,
more of those ad dollars.
all about
Um,
money.
so I think that's really important to consider when we are developing our message, because it often feels like we are running against the wind. And that is
Mm-hmm.
by design. And we have to remember that, because at the end of the day, communicating authentically is going to be way more powerful than communicating the way some social algorithm wants you to.
And that brings us right back to why are you neglecting your email?
There you go.
Like full circle all of those reasons. If only there was another way. Like, oh
Mm-hmm.
wait, that email list you haven't touched in a minute, or
Yeah.
are sending blanket emails to the whole list. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the point too, on like back to your roles. Like, what is the role of social media? What is the role of email? And I would argue in our current environment, social media's role is to be the passer on. Like it's
Yep.
the stopgap before you get to your website or your email or your event or whatever it may be.
Yeah, I agree. I say that social media is like the visual reminder people need to know you exist.
Mm.
And not that there can't be deep, incredible content on social media. I think there absolutely can. I think of the talk Trevor Project had, where they had like Daniel Radcliffe come in and talk with like trans non-binary people. That was
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
social
yeah.
campaign, and that was incredible. And like, so that's not to say that like social, if if you're hearing this and you're like, oh my God, these people don't think social is worth anything. No, that's not what we're saying. But it is there to remind people, it is there to give the highlights, it is there to maybe quick tell those stories. Yes, you can have longer form content. A lot of people don't have money to produce stuff like that on YouTube. But it is there to kind of just be like, hey, I'm still
Yeah.
here. And eventually they see that enough that they go, oh, maybe I should check out their podcast, or maybe I should check out their email, um, or go to their website. But yeah, it's the gateway. It's like the honey to catch the flies or whatever.
We haven't really touched too much on automation directly, so I wanted to circle
Yeah.
back there, because I think when we're talking about these bridges between social and email, having personalized messaging, all of that sounds really intimidating because it sounds like a lot of extra work. And I would love for you to dispel those myths.
Oh, yes. I'd love that. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think so if you're coming at this and you've never done automation before, um, first thing is probably looking at what email client you have and seeing what automation is possible for you. That's
Right.
like a really good first step. Um, and I think, all the ones that I've worked with, some are better than others or easier to figure out, but they all, I mean, there's none that don't have like a guide or a walkthrough or a blog post telling you how to set up your first automated campaign. Like
Mhm.
there's definitely something out there like that. So that would be the first thing. I think also finding the right time to use it if you're new.
Mm,
Like do you have a campaign coming up that you think is going to take you a lot of work and you're trying to lessen the load? I know the first time ever that I dove into automation years ago was I had this campaign. It was just going to be massive and I knew it was not sustainable. And I was like, there has to be a way to better, execute this. And there was. And so
mm,
I think, looking at when would it be most valuable for you, because if you don't see a value in it as a communicator, your willingness to set it up and continue it is going to be next to zero. You're
right.
already stretched thin. So figuring out what's the best way to do that. I think like if you don't have something coming up and you're just wanting to foray into automation, I think a welcome series is a fantastic place to start. You're driving people to sign up. So then what? Do you have like, and I say this about social a lot too, like, do you have a reel that went viral? Repost that reel. Like, do you have an email series that was incredible? Do you have a blog that like knocks your socks off, like, and you loved it? Okay, that sounds like great content for a welcome series. I guarantee you the welcome series is like 80%, if not 90% written from past content that has performed well. So like if someone's
Mm,
new to your org, why not create a series where they get hit with your best content? That's fantastic.
yeah.
So that would be like my first kind of suggestion if you're foraying into automation for the first time. And the welcome series is something that I think a lot of people neglect or they don't feel they have time for. But it's not that bad. And like I said, you've already written most of it. So just think of
Yeah.
like your biggest hits and you're pretty much putting them now. That's what we call marketing playlists together for your welcome. If you're pretty experienced with automation, I don't know what general advice I'll give you that'll, amaze you, but I would say if you've dipped your toe in, what could you have learned from that? What kind of data did you notice? I think
Mm,
also like offloading your list, like cleaning and calling your list is important. And that can look like an automation too. We noticed you haven't opened our emails in a while. Wanted to see if you're still interested. That's an automated thing.
mhm.
If you're having a campaign where you're moving people to action or donate, I do think email is great for donating. So even though I'm always like development, I love development. Like I don't want it to come off that I don't. I love development. But they donated. So then what? Can you
Mhm.
automate that? Um, yeah, I think just being creative and thinking of ways to better engage people, and if it'll lessen your workload, which eventually, once you get a lot of things automated, you look very, very active and you haven't touched that stuff in a
Yeah.
bit. And they don't
Yeah.
know because they're new. So they don't know that this has gone out before.
Yeah. I mean, I think especially with the welcome email, you know,
Yeah,
like I was trying to pull up the stat and I couldn't find it, but the majority of nonprofits do not have a welcome email. So you
right.
sign up for their email and maybe you'll get their newsletter in a month. But if you're an organization that doesn't have the capacity to be communicating frequently over email, having that welcome email is a huge way to get people like to support your organization early on when they're first getting
Yeah.
to know you.
And they like already just said they want to know you. It's
Right.
I'm like it's kind of like dating, right? I mean, I haven't done that, I've been with my partner for nearly a decade, but seen friends go through it. And it's like dating, like someone's like, okay, cool, yeah, like let's hang out. And then you do the whole game thing of don't text them for 48 hours or wait a couple
Yes.
days and don't respond back before 2 hours, like or all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, how good would it feel if you're like, here's my number, and then in whatever time you feel comfortable with, you're like, hey, let's hang out again. Like that feels good. Like to know that like what you signed up for is what you're getting. And similarly, they just signed up to get more information. The worst thing, I would argue, is that you give your information to an organization, you're excited to learn more, you have looked through their website, but you're not going to read everything on it because you too have a life. And then you don't hear from them.
Yeah.
And then you're like, and then you do hear from them and you're like, who's this? What is this?
Yeah.
Like, unsubscribe.
And that's so important too, because when I'm checking email, I get used to email senders. If there's a particular organization that I really like their emails, I note that. And so when I see that sender come through, I'm not mass archiving it like all the other emails. And if you're not capturing them right when they have that point of interest, you might have already lost them.
Exactly. And I think especially of like Gmail, you have the primary inbox, the updates, primary updates. Gosh, I can't even remember, because that's case in point. That's how much we ignore those other tabs, y'all.
Right.
Primary promotions, social updates, and forums. I remember when Gmail introduced those, I was like, this is great for the user. It's going to be a lot harder for marketers. But I'll tell you what, when I see someone I really like and they're in the updates or the promotions section and it shows you the preview of the new ones you've gotten in there, if I see that name, I'm like, oh crap, what did you send me? Oh, cool. Let me go grab that. Similarly, if something I really was looking forward to, I newly subscribed to your list, I'm super jazzed about your org, and then you send me information and it's over in one of those folders, I may take that and drag it to my primary and tell Gmail, hey, this one I actually want to see all the time in my primary. Yeah. But they might not have that same passion for you a week later after you've blown them off.
I feel like we need a slogan here. It's like, be that first date that drags to the primary inbox.
Be worthy of a primary drag.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's real though. I literally, right before we hopped on this call, I saw one that I had recently subscribed to and it went over to my updates. And I was like, what are you doing over there? No, Gmail. Always put this to my primary. This is stuff I want to see.
Yeah, that's important. Well, we do have to start wrapping up, but I have 2 more questions for you, and it has been a joy so far to speak with you. So just like a very general question that I ask everyone is just like, what's one piece of advice you'd give a communicator in this current era that we're in?
One piece.
Can be anything. No pressure.
Yeah. Oh God, that almost makes it worse. Like, put some guardrails on me or something.
I know, right?
One piece of advice. I'm gonna cheat a way around this one piece of advice. The human in me says that take care of yourself, because if you don't feel empowered to do the work, it's going to show and you're not going to do your best work. The communicator person in me says, think about your ecosystem and how, like I keep saying holistically, but think of how everything connects. Figure out where you're going to get the most like return on your effort in a way that makes you, I guess this goes back to burnout, but like, where are you getting that return and how can you simplify it for yourself? Automation, email, repurposing content, evergreen campaigns. What can you do to make your life easier? That's also really impactful for your audience. And coming back to, don't forget the human of it all. I know I totally didn't stick to one thing. I guess my one piece of advice would be human, and then you apply that in whichever way you see fit under those 3 buckets.
I think you perfectly answered that question. It was beautifully themed as human.
Thank you. Yeah.
And it's a perfect segue into my final question, which is, how do you stay sane in this wild world?
Oh, do I? No. That's
what are the small moments
here. No, I think yeah, that's great. I mean, well, I love dogs, first of all. I have too many dogs. I love my dogs. So like finding something that, pulls you out of it, whether that be a pet or a book club, like something that literally like, I just say pets because like they don't care. They need to go bathroom. They don't care. They need to eat.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. But I think the other thing too is just knowing that staying on all the time will not change the world. Like you have the capacity to change the world and make an impact. I believe we all do. But that being said, if you're showing up absolutely depleted and exhausted, it's okay to take a break. I think a big thing is just stepping away from the news. Yes, news is so important. Yes, being updated and informed is great. But also at the end of the day, it's okay to say there's nothing I can do about this right now. And I think I should go pet my dog.
Yeah. That is beautifully and well said. And I could not agree more. It is the weekend and it's Friday for me. And I hope that both of us just go pet some dogs and go be human.
Yes, it's
So
fall. It's, that cool weather. I've already sat outside most of today. A lot of people go out when it's warm. I'm like, oh my God, it's 50s. Let's go sit outside.
I bet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you, Brit. Do you just want to quickly say how people can find you? And I know we'll have links at the bottom too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to connect with folks. You can go to my website, Did Juno, that's DIDJUNO.com. We have social media. We're not super active because I'm doing all of y'all's instead.
Right.
But yeah, y'all can find me there. Also, if you'd like to connect or follow up on anything we talked about today, I'm always down for a good conversation. Feel free to drop a line at hi@didjuno.com. And that gets routed to me. If you just say something like, I heard this or read this in Nerdology, love to pick your brain. Absolutely, they'll get routed to me. Yeah, would love to chat.
Cool. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you later.
Thanks so much, Sam.
Okay. I think we're out. I think.